Hello, my name is Chris Asaro, and I am president of Holt Construction. Holt Construction is one of the country's leading builders, and we are especially recognized for our work in the aviation sector with a large portfolio in the Northeast as well as across the country. We have been working at Newark Liberty International Airport for over 30 years, and our offices at the airport are always open to you. Holt is very committed to diversity and including small and local businesses, especially MWBEs, local businesses, and veteran-owned businesses in our projects. Our work also supports local residents to help them build a career in construction. This year, we have launched a new program, Building Newark Airport Together. That features special sessions every Friday, noon to 1 p.m. These sessions provide you with important information about contract and career opportunities and will open the gate to building your business and your career with us.
Thank you, Chris. I'm Alexandria Parati, and I am so pleased to serve as your program host for our Opportunity Friday series. Opportunity Fridays are important sessions that will introduce you to what you need to know about working with Holt Construction, as well as the specific contract packages that are available for bidding on Newark's new Terminal A. We also want local residents to learn more about how they can work in the construction industry with Holt, as well as on other projects. As an organization, Holt Construction is truly committed to building Newark Airport together. Each of our Opportunity Friday sessions are devoted to specific topics and include an opportunity for live questions and answers. At the end of each information session, we will review direct contract opportunities that you may be interested in bidding once you have pre-qualified with us. So let's get started with today's session, Understanding a Bid Part 2, Bid Leveling and Other Contractor Review. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Today, we will give you a firsthand understanding of what construction managers like Holt are considering as they review your bid. This session explains which tools construction managers use to compare and contrast bids. A bid leveling sheet is one of the processes that is used. While the lowest bid is the goal, a bid review examines many factors such as available labor, equipment, materials, time frame, and most important, an understanding of what is required to complete a project from the contractor's perspective. Bid review will explore many aspects that the bidder may not be considering or including in his bid. Now, let me have my panel introduce themselves. Jason, could you start?
I'm Jason Leisure. I'm project executive and business unit leader for New Jersey for Holt Construction.
Alan?
Alec Ross, Director of Purchasing for Holt Construction.
Hi, I'm Pamela Skidmore, and I'm a project manager for Holt Construction.
My name is Malay Patel. I'm a purchasing agent for Holt Construction.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I know we've had a lot of questions from our subcontractors about, our bid leveling process and who asked the questions, and there might be a little bit of confusion. So today we're going to demystify the bid leveling process and go through each one of you and how you look at it and what you particularly look for. At the end of this session, we're going to go through a couple samples of our bid leveling sheets so everyone can see exactly the nuances and what we're looking for in your bid. So let's start with a couple questions of our panel to ease into the conversation. So after a bid is submitted to Holt, what happens? So Jason Leisure, after the bid comes into estimating, what happens?
First thing you're looking for from me, and hopefully the estimators as well, is looking at their qualifications and exclusions, making sure that they're capturing everything that's in there, everything that's for the project, and identifying the items and the reasoning why there's something that's excluded from their bid. Then really is looking at their pricing and looking how it compares to everybody else. Then you can start diving into the comparative nature between each subcontractor, what may be differentiating each other from one value from one subcontractor to another.
Right. Now, Alec, after a bid is submitted to Holt, it's submitted to our estimating department through our building connected system. After it's submitted to our estimating department, it does come to your department next, correct?
Correct. Yeah, after estimating takes the subcontractor's proposals, analyzes it, and levels them through a leveling process. They send a leveling sheet to us as a handoff with the proposals, and we recheck the proposals as well as the leveling sheet, and we go through the process again to make sure that they are complete, thorough, and up to date.
The reason why we go through the leveling process again is something might have changed down the road. There might have been something that estimating didn't carry, but we know needs to be in the bid itself. So you will add those things and make sure that we're looking at apples to apples, right?
Yeah, we'll make adjustments as needed, fill in the gaps if they're there, and make some corrections if that's also needed as well. And we'll try to have a final clean version of the leveling sheet at the end of the process.
And then your leveling sheet, once you're done, you're going to hand it back over to Jason's team because they're the operations department and they're going to bid, they're going to not award, but they were going to work with these subs. So the flow of this is they submit their bid to estimating. Estimating will have a leveling sheet that they will fill out. That leveling sheet will then get sent to you, Alec, and Jason Leisure will look at it for the nuances that are needed for that specific project to make sure everything is included. And then Alec, you look through everything, make sure it's complete. You make the award letter goes out, and then you send the package over back to operations so that they start construction. Is that the way it flows?
Yeah, definitely. And we'll make sure that handoff from purchasing to operations, they have the backups and the information that reflects the proposals and the latest proposals, as well as the information that reflects what the subcontractor is going to provide in terms of labor and material for that building.
Now, I know that sometimes people say, you know, this department asks me questions, and then this department asks me questions, and then this department asks me questions, but it's really not, Jason, to hinder the sub or to be annoying. It's just to make sure they have everything covered, especially in an aviation project, to make sure that the sub doesn't get hurt on one of these projects by leaving something out that we know needs to be there that they might not know because they're not an aviation contractor as we are, being in aviation for decades. So it's kind of more of a sharing of knowledge. And a lot of the nuances, Jason, are like escorting, you know, scanning floors, you know, coring, those things that, you know, some people think, oh, you know, yeah, I have it, but you don't have it in the right aspect that it's needed for aviation.
Yeah, and to add to that, the logistics of a particular space within the airport is not necessarily depicted on the drawings that they're bidding. So it's up to us to be able to convey that to the subcontractor, ask those questions. How do you see yourself filling this project? How do you see your workflow? How do you see your getting deliveries there? What is your thought process from, say, your point of connectivity or your layout or any number of facets? How do you see that happening? Because within an airport environment, there could be so many different facets going on. There could be other entities building around you. There could be an adjacent tenant. There could be something below your space that you have to be cognizant of that it's going to impact your work and may slow you down. And those kinds of things, if you're not taking that into account, or at least having some preparedness going into it, it could hurt you. So we ask these questions of each one of our subcontractors to make sure that they are comfortable with their number, their timing, their labor, and any other little pieces that they may need to throw into their project to make sure that they're covering themselves. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, we're all in this to make money, right? So if we're going into this and we're already trying to pigeonhole a subcontractor into a number and not ask the questions, we're doing them and us and our clients a disservice. So we're making sure that we're capturing all those components. That way it's a complete package, a complete program, a complete project. So that way everybody has the opportunity to make some money at the end of the day.
Great. Pam, question for you. When you're working with a sub and you get a package from purchasing and you're looking at all the subs, are you sending a letter of introduction to the sub, introducing you to them? Because this is when you step in after the handoff from purchasing. How do you meet the new subs or the old subs or get them, kicked off on the project?
I first like to introduce our project team and give them a contact list of who they can reach out to, whether it be me, an assistant PM, our accounting field team. Also give them updated documents, because from the time of bidding to the time of where we're at, there might be some changes. So I like to get them introduced with what next steps are and how we can go from there, and explain to them in an email to how we plan to see this project working, but then also do the reach out on a phone call to make sure that they understand I'm always going to be there for a project. Any questions or concerns, I'm willing to walk them through.
Great. Malay, let's go to you. When you're working with a sub and you have, 4 bidders, 6 bidders, how do you break the bad news to a sub that's not the low bidder, and how do you tell them they're the successful bidder?
So when we have multiple bidders, say we have 4 or 5 bidders, like we mentioned before, once we're leveling them out and it comes down to the final number, we go out for best and finals, and they give us their final values. And then, we call the lowest bidder, and if they have the complete scope, we'll tell them they're the lowest bidder. We'll tell them by how much, or, a percentage. We won't tell them exact numbers. And then for someone who came in second or third, we obviously want them to continue to bid on next jobs and to stay in the loop and continue working with Holt. So we'll let them know where they're falling off and how far off their numbers were, based on a percentage, and where they can improve based off of their leveling sheet. And that's kind of how we communicate to our subcontractors. And they do appreciate this, because, this is feedback they can use on other projects.
Great. Alex, for you, I always hear 2 terms, and I know what they mean, and I know everybody on the panel knows what they mean, but the audience might not, because it did take me a little while to understand the difference. So if you can explain the difference between low bid and best value.
Sure. Low bid, just the price is basically the lowest number. Now, best value qualifies as the best bidder, is the most qualified bidder that has the complete scope for what we need for the project.
Great. And when you say most qualified, what does that mean?
Most qualified means that they are reflecting in the proposal the spec that we need, the material that we need, the labor that we need, the service that we need, the schedule, and just they have the most complete package for what we require for the project.
So it's really not an arbitrary thing. It's really a deep dive into their proposal and into their bid leveling sheets, and making sure they have enough manpower schedule. They have the actual schedule, they have the manpower to complete the schedule on time. The funding that they need up front so that they can have their equipment on site. So there's a lot of things that, you look at in purchasing, estimating looks at, and operations looks at. So it's kind of a tri-party review to make sure that the subs are right for the project and giving the best value to the client as far as price.
Definitely.
So Pam, as far as, when a sub receives an award letter, if they have any questions on that award letter, would they go back to purchasing? I will let everybody understand the differences. Sometimes the award letters could come out from operations, but most of the time they do come out from purchasing. If the letter comes out from purchasing, they would ask the question if they had any question of purchasing, and then if it came from operations, they would ask that project manager the question. Is that a good way to delineate between?
Yeah, you can ask either or. I mean, obviously go to the person who issued the letter, but ultimately, if you ask me the question, I'm going to contact Alec and find out maybe I didn't see something and he had a discussion that I wasn't aware of, and vice versa. I may have a conversation with the sub during the award process that maybe Alec didn't capture in his award letter.
Right. So it's really all about the common thing across any industry. It's communication between all three departments to make the project successful and our subs successful and ultimately us successful at the end of the day. You know, if a sub is not the low bidder, Jason, and they didn't get enough information, or maybe, you know, whoever their contact is at Holt is a little busy, or they're not getting back to them quickly. What do you suggest they do if they want a, you know, a debrief on their bid, you know, maybe a quick Zoom meeting to review? Are you open to doing that? And have you done that before?
Oh, many times. I'm always open to that. It's, you know, more often than not, I get reached out to by subcontractors and they'll ask a question about a particular project. Now, I try to stay above a lot of the weeds for the projects, but I do dive into them a lot. And I'll have, if there's a question that I can't particularly answer because of maybe some very specific nuance to whatever the question is, I reach out to my staff. I'll engage my staff and say, hey, introduce Pam Skidmore. She can answer your question for you better than I can, or Alec Ross can answer that question. But I typically will get into it and answer whatever question they have. I'll find the answer for them. I'm open. My door, my email, my texts are always open for anybody to reach out to me for any questions.
All right, so that was great. I think we really got into a lot of questions that our subcontractors joining us today are going to have. So I want to share my screen with everyone and let you see what a bid leveling sheet looks like at Holt. And then hopefully it'll help when you're looking at this bid leveling sheet, certain things that we ask for. So now we just have this generic. There's going to be in the bid leveling sheet that you receive, you'll have, you know, your specific trade. This one right here we're looking at is drywall and carpentry. So Alec, under general project requirements, what are those and why are those put in here?
Sure. The leveling sheet's formatted in a way where the left side is what Holt is asking the subcontractors to capture in their scope of work. The general project requirements is a list of the bid documents that we sent out when we invited the bidders to send their proposals in, and it lists all the drawings, the specifications, any owner's requirements for the project, and possibly, and it also outlines some of the building requirements that may be needed for logistics and schedule.
Right. So Pam, going through these the general project requirements, just to name a couple here, why do we ask if the contractor visited the site and for delivery requirements? Why is that important that we ask that?
Well, one, we want them to acknowledge that they understand the existing conditions and also understand the logistics for when it comes to deliveries. The type of atmosphere and working, how many people can actually fit in a space. If they're a 700 square foot space actually seems a lot bigger in a drawing than it does when you're physically there. It's a number of things just to make sure that they're prepared for when we start work, they can do it the most effective way, and they include that in their proposal.
Great. Jason Leisure, as far as schedule, we have a couple questions in here for long lead items and lead times for shop drawings and fabrication and installation. Why do you and Holt, why do we like to see those lead times up front prior to award?
Well, lead time specifically, how it impacts the schedule when it falls within what we see the flow of construction is during the course of the project. Also lets the client know that, you know, for instance, if you have a new tenant or client going into the airport, they have a finite date for when they're going to start paying lease. So they'll have a period of time that they're allowed for construction, and then they start paying money for that space, utilization of that space. If they're not creating revenue, they're losing money day on day. So we want to be able to tell them up front, here, you have an impact to your schedule, whether it's something site logistically, it could be something for procurement, maybe the long lead time, maybe it's shipping, whatever the case may be, maybe it's fabrication, maybe it's shop drawings and the like. We can let them know how that impacts the schedule, so we can identify those things and try to find maybe alternatives, and a like product that I can get locally sourced. Maybe I have some acceleration for fabrication, or a different avenue for shipping methods and the like, and how I can have that pull back on my schedule and make it a little bit better for the client, and for the project in and of itself, because how each subcontractor works is where another contractor is going to pick up from there. So framing goes up, roughing goes in, walls get closed, items for millwork, paint, and so on, finishes go on. Those kinds of things are flow together. And if there's one impact from one, it affects everybody else, and it affects the overall project. So I want to know those things up front. There's something that stands out. I've had things recently where walk-in boxes have 52-week lead times. And of course, that's going to kill a 16-week project. So I need to know what those things are up front, so I can start saying, oh, we're going to have to find an alternative right now. Let's find something. And I'll ask even the subcontractors, what do you have? Do you know of anything that you can get better that's going to meet the specific criteria for this specific item? And we can work together right away.
Now, Alec, there's another part of the general project requirements in here. Why is it so important that we put the dates of the bid, of the project plans and specifications in the leveling sheet, as well as any addendums in the leveling sheets? Why is it so important that that information itself is in the leveling sheet?
Sure. We want to make sure that the bidders are capturing the most updated documents and drawings. When we sent out the original bid invites, they may have been dated from a certain set that has been superseded by a certain addendum. So we want to make sure they are capturing the latest and greatest documents that we need for the project.
Great. Now, Malay, for working times, I know that some trades are always off hours, like demolition, especially in the airport. Our demolition contractors are never on straight time. They're always on, night shift. Why is it so important that we lay out the actual working hours for the project here in the leveling sheet?
Absolutely, yeah. So working times is very important because, like you said, demo guys work off hours, noisy work is off hours, stuff that can disturb neighboring tenants would be off hours. It's very important that we lay this out in the leveling sheet, because this is it's not just the time that contractors come in. They're also paying their laborers, and it can mean sometimes they're working on double time or overtime, and this can drastically increase or decrease their price if they don't know when they're going to be working. So they have to know exactly when they'll be working so they can price the job accurately.
Right. Now, because the minority and women-owned businesses and the local participation is so important on, all Holt projects, we always ask, this labor section here, under labor agreements, Pam, why do we like to ask, the second tier subs, who they're using, what their participation is?
Well, first and foremost, understanding the level of participation they can provide will help us make sure that we meet or at least exceed any goals set forth. We're always trying to get the most, participation we can from those disadvantaged businesses. When it comes to a second tier sub, not only do their points, help us meet those goals, but it's also, we need to know who we can expect to be on our job site. If we're expecting subcontractor A and to perform carpentry work, and they sub out the work to subcontractor B, well, we need to know that we're expecting them on site to make sure we have the proper compliance documents in place.
Great. For logistics and planning, Jason, this kind of goes back to my question about, why it's so valuable to visit the site before preparing a bid so that you know all of these things. Us asking these questions of a sub, how are you loading your materials? Do you know the freight elevator size, just to make sure that their materials can fit in the elevator, how they anticipate getting to the elevator, the staging area. Why don't we ask all of those questions? Because when I'm looking at it, if I look at it as a lay person, it's a little like, why are you asking me all these questions? These are a lot of questions, but why do we make sure that we ask specifically these?
Time is money, right? So if they're factoring in some other means, getting onto the site, performing their work, their own logistical planning, how they're seeing the project, and it differs completely from what our thinking is, there is a dollar value associated with it. Maybe they see it as an easier means, and we'll have that discussion. I think it could be done this way, and that's great. We want to have that dialogue, that back and forth, to find easier means to make a project move quicker, move smoothly. Or they may not have realized that the loading dock and the freight elevator is 1,000 yards away, or it isn't only an 8x6 elevator and their 20-foot pieces of material aren't going to fit. How are they going to get it in? They thought they had a straight shot. They didn't think that they had anything in their way. Any one of these number of things. We're going to ask all these questions because as the construction manager and the general contractor, we're asking subcontractors to bid. We know this stuff. We know the project. So we're going to make sure that they know it as well. So that way we're not pigeonholing them into something that they're not prepared for going into the project.
Now, Alec, I'm looking at the sheets right now and I'm scanning through them. Some of them have NA by them. So this means to me that this is kind of a basic sheet that Holt uses company-wide. We don't really deviate from this sheet for aviation or for healthcare or for, if we're working in Manhattan in certain buildings. So if ever there's something that's not applicable to their trade, is it acceptable for them to write NA in here that it's not applicable to them? Or how do you like people to handle certain parts of the D-scope sheet that doesn't pertain to them?
Yeah, absolutely. For example, what we're looking at is the drywall and carpentry leveling sheet, and most of our leveling sheets are generalized, but also specific to that trade. But in certain sections, such as the building vendors, doesn't really apply to the drywall and carpentry trade. So we'll try and make sure that we're guiding the subs and letting them know it's not applicable, and conversely, they can mark up the leveling sheet to say that it's not applicable as well, which we actually want.
Now, the specific trade scope, this is where our leveling sheets get into the nitty gritty of the project, right? So this is where we include everything and we ask them all of the bits and pieces of the scope that we want to make sure that they have. And we don't just say drywall and carpentry. We're saying, hollow metal doors and frames. We're saying toilet accessories. We're getting into the nitty gritty here, but every D-scope sheet in this section is going to be a little bit different for the carpentry trade, depending on the project, right, Alec?
Yeah, absolutely. And, the purpose of the leveling sheet is to specify what we're looking for from the bidders. And sometimes there's trades that overlap. Blocking could be done by mill worker versus the carpenter for drywall. The doors, frames, and hardware, we could be buying it separately, or we're asking the carpentry trade to capture it in their scope. So this really helps narrow down specifically and exactly what Holt is asking from these subcontractors.
That's great. I think we went over every single piece of the drywall and carpentry D-scope sheet. So I think I'm going to jump now to the next D-scope sheet. I think that was great. I think we went through all the nuances and all the special things that we look for in the carpentry and drywall scope. A lot of those things transfer into all of the other trades. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I think we did a great job demystifying the D-scope process and what different hands it goes into and how you all look at, the trades and the subs and the low bidders. I want to thank all of you for joining us today, and let's go through the current opportunities at Newark's new Terminal A.